Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar series today. I can see that some people are already connecting, and it's exactly 12 p.m. EST on the clock. So we're going to allow a couple of minutes to make sure that everybody can set up and take their time, grab a cup of tea if they want to, and then we will begin with our talk. So my name is Alice. I work as a senior outreach specialist here at Jove. And I am extremely pleased to present today's topic through what I believe will be one of the most interesting talks that we've had, thanks to the presence of our guest speaker, who's already smiling because I said I would not embarrass him, but here we are. And so the topic we are going to talk about today is how can libraries empower and support STEM research, which is something that a lot of librarians are tackling. They've always been tackling global issues through many, many different areas of their work. But STEM research is definitely something that is receiving more attention, more funding. And because Jove is a STEM-focused resource, we would like to hear what an experienced librarian has to say about it. So it is my pleasure to welcome Brian Matthews to today's talk as our guest. Brian is serving as the Associate Dean of Research and Innovation at Carnegie Mellon University, and he's got an extensive career in leadership positions in different libraries across the country. So I will not take any more of his time, and I will allow him to actually enlighten us with his very insightful presentation. But before, let me tell you, all of you, you've got a chat box there and a Q&A box. Please use them. Use them to ask any questions you might have, even if it's housekeeping things you want to ask me directly. I'll be taking care of the chat and the communication while Brian talks, and then we will get to an interactive Q&A at the end of the session where he's going to answer some of the questions that you've sent and some of the questions that you have sent in advance, which I would like to thank everybody for actually doing that. Without further ado, Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I've not seen any questions in advance, so we'll be learning about that together. Let's go ahead and launch into this. So we look good there?
Yes, I can see that. All good.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and checking out this webinar. I called it the Scaffolding of Discovery, How Libraries Can Empower STEM Research. And I'm really interested and fascinated in ideas and problems and questions, how people find ideas, problems, and questions, how they are developed, how they're organized and managed. And we're going to dig into that a little bit today. We're going to look into some infrastructure and some scaffolding, to do that. So thanks for that. And I think first I want to just share like my style of librarianship is I like to go out into the field and see what's happening. I want to go into the labs. I want to go into the workshops, the meeting rooms, wherever it's happening, and just kind of see with my own eyes, like how does research come together? How does it unfold? What does the information landscape look like? You can kind of see that here. And they're not paying me to do a promotional or anything like that, but I think that's something that's really cool about Jove, is that it does provide you with like thousands of hours of video where you can watch people doing experiments or talking about process or whatever. And I think from a librarian point of view, that's really good insight for us to understand our communities a little bit more, to understand the problems and questions that they're working on or dealing with, and it allows us to ask deeper questions or go even further into that. So I just want to thank Joe for hosting this talk today. We'll start early on. We'll go with Galileo here. And I think what's really interesting to me about the Galileo story is that he improves upon the design of the telescope, and that in doing that and improving the technology of his day, he's dramatically and drastically improving the power of magnification from 30 times to 20 times, what was possible. And because of that, Galileo is able to see further than anyone else, like quite literally. And with that, he can ask new questions. He can pose new ideas and explore new problems and possibilities that were unimaginable, before, because that technology didn't exist, that insight didn't exist. And I'll go back. I think a thing that's also interesting about Galileo is that he not only does he share his insight, his scientific, insights, but he's also sharing his technology. He's kind of drawing out, describing like what his telescope looked like, how the lenses were done, and it's kind of a version of like sharing code today is how I would liken that, your code and your data, so that others could build upon it. And there was this whole enthusiasm now of around astronomy. So I think what's also interesting to me is this science has this continuous pattern of enhancing or developing or introducing or innovating new tools, new technologies that allow us to unlock, again, new questions, new ideas, new problems, new insights. And there's that lineage, there's that building upon those insights. You see Newton's contributions here. And on and on. I think there's tools that were developed that allow us to see further. There's some that allow us to look closer, and even to look at certain details and really zero in on things like that. So this is a CMU example here of not only are we, or I guess it's interesting to think about technology that allows us to create interactions between particles or chemicals or materials of some sort and be able to observe those interactions and measure them in sort of new ways. I thought this one was a really interesting photo there. And then we kind of see, it's a lineage. There's an improvement. What CERN was able to build, new tools that allows us to do new research, new science, new ideas, new problems, new possibilities. And again, it's this continual progress of unlocking knowledge. And we get to where we are today. I think I can't go a day without being invited to like attend some talk that someone is doing about AI. I think there's probably one right now. Different kind of things are happening, but regardless, I think generative AI, computer visioning, machine learning, it's obviously these things are transforming science and scholarship and the world around us. And again, I see that as part of the Galileo lineage, using technology that we have today to expand the types of questions, the types of problems, and the approaches to those problems, to look at stars in different ways and do different things. And so that's my prelude. I'm setting up a theme around tools and technology and how it opens up new possibilities. Keep that in mind. And I think my goal today is I want to plant 3 seeds, 3 idea seeds, with you of, again, how we can, as librarians, how we can help STEM researchers expand their toolkit, expand that scaffolding that exists. First seed that I want to share is, can we help people integrate their thinking? So if you think about like all the notes and data sets and articles and proposals, presentations and protocols, a lot of P words there, but project management and all the different things that are kind of happening in the sort of research lab space, or even in the non-research lab space, just the work that researchers are doing. How could there be some value, some insight that's gained from connecting all of those things come together, helping people harness that better? That's what this seed is really about. I'll start by sharing, like, this is kind of embarrassing, but this is kind of my desk. It looked like a nice spring day though in Pittsburgh. This is my photo during pandemic, during lockdown days, and I was just on Zoom like most people, like all day, all week, and I'm taking constant notes. And these notes became really unusable for me. I couldn't read most of it. Ideas would get lost. I would forget about things. It was just a mess, and that's kind of that life I was in. And then I think a thing that really helped me was starting to change my approach with something called linking your thinking. Nick Milo he has a YouTube channel. He has a cohort-based program that I was in. And it really kind of gets into how do we manage our knowledge more effectively. And he uses this concept called idea emergence, and I'll kind of walk you through it here, and then I'll show an applied version. But it starts with, we have these loose thoughts, these hunches that we want to explore, or this little bit of maybe some knowledge over here, these things that kind of bubble up, and then they become a note, if you will. They become something we might scribble down, or something we want to share in a conversation, or a fact, or a, whatever that is in your world or the scientist world. And as these kind of bubble up, they kind of start to connect. We can kind of start to get them, they're like tangible ideas almost. And through these connections, you start to have a chain of thought. Something emerges, kind of between these. And as you add more and more of these content, like you saw all my pages of on the print thing that I had all over, how can I replicate that digitally, but be able to kind of connect things in a very more, articulate and kind of useful way. So as we gather and accumulate more and more ideas and data and all the things, from readings, from conversations, from experiments, from just whatever our content sources are, we start to have this cognitive scaffolding is a word I use a lot, but it allows the patterns to kind of stand out. We see, oh, this is interesting, and this is interesting, and this method could be interesting. That starts to form this conversation, and you kind of get this sort of crucible, I guess you can kind of call it. But we kind of start to build this universe of knowledge, this ecosystem of ideas, and in a very systematic way, you can assemble your content, assemble those ideas, and they kind of collide, if we're going to use that sort of analogy. They can kind of collide. You can push things, you can build things, you can sharpen your thinking, and eventually you kind of get to this point where you've kind of got a unifying thing. So here's all these kind of possibilities, let's kind of work them through, and then here's this kind of line of thought that emerges. Now I'm ready to share something or test something or do something. That's kind of what that happens, and you can do this systematically through certain tools. So again, it's this idea accelerator, idea incubator type of thing. And I think, with that, there's this, let me see, you get that sort of Galileo type of telescope where, again, it's allowing us to look at our ideas, differently, but to see them further, see beyond what was possible before. You start building these relationships where you have these certain methodologies, or you have these sort of schools of thought, or this kind of literature here, or these people that are working on this problem in this way, and we're approaching this way, and you start to like bring that together. That's what's kind of represented, in this. It's this stacks, layering, mixing, and matching. Again, this catalyst that goes into your thinking, into your papers, into your projects, into your proposals. That's kind of that's the gist of it. So this is where I started. Again, this sort of piles of paper, Word documents, Google documents, PDFs, Evernote for a little while. And it really was this disconnected, useless, embarrassing kind of mess that somehow I like to show because there's I've moved on from it. And this is kind of where I'm at today. This is using Obsidian, which is an open source free tool. And I'm not promoting Obsidian, but it's a great tool. This is a graphical view, about 2,000, a little over 2,000 notes now, probably about 18 months of using it. And this captures my meetings and conversations, writings, readings, the notes I'm sharing today, PDFs, spreadsheets, random ramblings, all that's kind of linked together in this sort of ecosystem that's kind of custom for what I need it to be. And I felt like I really needed to master this kind of skill, this kind of thing, to be able to share it with others. Because often when I'm in the labs, when I'm in those workshops, when I'm in the meetings with scientists, and I talk to them about how do they manage their information, it's very much more like this than like this. And so it's kind of, I need to feel confident, and I want to have something I can demo to people. And so that's what I've been kind of working on the side of, I'm using it to enhance my professional work, but it's also meant to be something that I want to kind of promote to researchers, STEM or otherwise, in that regard. And what's kind of cool about this is you can zero in on a particular topic or concept, a person who I meet with all the time regularly, or a project, whatever is in your world, so to speak, literally. And you can visualize a footprint. You can also create a list out of that. So this is what AI looks like. This is about probably 20 notes. I dabble a lot in AI, but it's not a major thrust of in my space here. But that's just kind of an example where you can see here's this large world, but you can start to kind of navigate through that. And so I think what I want to get with this sort of idea seed here is just to think about ways that we can maybe help people to integrate their thinking, their notes, all the artifacts that they're kind of creating, the insights, the problems that are nagging them, the problems they're excited about, the questions they want to explore, the results, all the kind of stuff that our researchers, STEM and otherwise, are sort of dealing with. And I think that we professionally, we often talk about data management. I think that's driven a lot by, at least in the US, by a lot of, and probably in Europe too, compliance issues that we have to deal with from publishers, but also from agencies. But I think this world of information management or knowledge management or idea management is such vast untapped potential. And so that's the first seed I want to plant, is just that piece of how do we integrate our thinking? How do we help people integrate their thinking? How do we help labs integrate their thinking? So that's the first seed. The second seed, and it's related, uh, is this idea of integration. So not only are there, like I'm using Obsidian to capture my notes, but there's other platforms that can interact kind of with that. So I'm going to show you 3 examples of what those different people with different systems look like. And I'm not necessarily promoting any particular app or solution. I think it's what I've kind of found from my experience and talking with others, that it's a very customized and very individualized setup, from even the aesthetics of what these things look like to how the needs and preferences and outputs. Some people are writing a lot of code, some people are writing more documents, some people are more images, whatever. But the idea of integrations really takes this whole thing to another level in terms of building accelerators or incubators. And I'm gonna show some examples. The first one is a colleague who is actually in the audience, so I'll probably embarrass him with this, so I'm sorry, Chas. But it's also, I think, I might phone a friend if there's a question about this, because Chas is really, really, really sharp in this area too. So first one is Chas. He's a science engineering librarian here at Carnegie Mellon. And this is kind of a demo or a schematic that kind of he's using. And I think it shows a similar pattern that we'll see in the other two, where there's different sort of inputs where, he's gaining articles or content from Scopus, Dimensions, whatever the different sources are, feeds into Zotero. And then from there, it can integrate with other sort of AI-driven tools like a Research Rabbit, Genius. There's other ones as well, which we'll see. But you can kind of see like Zotero kind of becomes that waypoint, I guess you can say, of the citations and material that he's interested in. From that, he's able to gather and interact with other sort of sources, which then get pushed into, this is the Obsidian logo, I guess, so sort of the tool that I was showing before with the visualizations. So that's where he's able to kind of, again, collide and sharpen and write and do some different kind of things like that sort of crucible or incubator kind of idea. And then it can kind of push that into writings that are into, Word or, other formats that he wants. So this is kind of it just kind of shows you that the knowledge management piece of like an Obsidian is one piece, but there's so much from an academic point of view or academic sort of aim. There's so many other tools that could integrate and cobble together. So thanks, Chas. This one, this is someone who was in the Linking Your Thinking, the Nick Milo Idea Emergence workshop that I was in. It's Cameron. He's a computer science. He's graduated since that time, but he was a computer engineering graduate student at Queen's University in Canada. And I know it's kind of hard to read it. I think with his, it's less about don't try to read it so much. It's more about trying to express the integrations that are kind of possible. And so, like Chas, I'm seeing like he's able to use these sort of AI-driven search engines of Perplexity and Find. And again, feeds Zotero his citations, so everything kind of lives there. He can dump some stuff into a read it later type of app. But again, everything here feeds into Obsidian. And in there, he's able to, Sparks are kind of like these ideas, notes, logs, different things that are coming together. He synthesizes there. That's where he kind of engages it. And again, that colliding of ideas, the sharpening of ideas, exploring, meshing things together. And then, in his, he kind of does 2 interesting things. One, he dumps some things like tasks and time management, gets it out of Obsidian and gets it into a separate app that's kind of focused on the productivity tools and calendars and things like that. And then he has his series of outputs. And so I can see here he's using, he's writing papers and he's doing a thesis, and you can kind of see he's using LaTeX for that and different kind of tools here. He's also doing talks and presentations, and I can see he's using PowerPoint, all these kind of things that he's using Let me move this over here. And then I have, code and experiments that he's doing, which is kind of connecting to Python and other sort of, software, kind of tools there. So again, it's less about trying to read or even trying to emulate this kind of thing. It's really more of like cobbling together the collection of sort of tools that meet what you're trying to do. How do you kind of find information? How do you kind of synthesize it? And then how do you share it? It's kind of a common pattern that we're kind of seeing. And I have one more example here. Non-STEM researcher, but we'll forgive her because her schematic is so impressive to me. This is Sophie. She also was in the class the cohort that I was in. She's based in Australia. I know it's really, really hard to read. She sent this to me, and even if I zoom in, and I'm going to zoom in, but even when I zoom in, it's really blurry. It's not perfect in that way. So I'm sorry about that. But I think you see a common pattern. Zoom stuff around here. You see a kind of common pattern where she has a series of inputs. She's gaining academic articles from somewhere. And then, she has these other things like Medium articles and general nonfiction and quotes that she's getting and podcasts that she's listening to. So again, all these different streams of information are feeding into other tools. And for her academic work, you see the trend line here, feeds into Zotero. And what I like about hers is it's I know you can't kind of read it, but it's like she gives herself like a protocol, or she gives herself a checklist of like, I import this data and then I move this, use the tool to do this, and then I highlight the PDF and do. So she's kind of has a workflow that she's kind of following for her academic work and how she's processing her notes, where she's saving her files, and what that's kind of looking like. And then I know there's lines all over, it's a mess, but the two things to focus on here is Readwise is kind of like, it's like Zotero for non-academic work, we'll kind of say. It's a way to collect different sources of content from online and put them into one sort of format. Readwise Reader is more of it's a reading tool kind of for that. She uses a tool for podcasts as well. So again, this is more the visual. So she's finding information. The academic stuff goes into one space. The non-academic stuff goes into another. Both of those feed into Obsidian. This is the other big theme you can see. There's like a lot of Obsidian love on here from me today, but it goes into her knowledge management tool. And then in here, she has different things. She has her literature notes that she's doing. She has these themes that she's building. She has just regular notes that she's doing, and daily notes and meeting notes, and on and on. That's the sort of customization of what does it need to look like for you. That's the I think the magic and flexibility of this type of thinking. And then you get to the output. So again, she has a section that's focused on her academic work. She's doing a thesis. She's writing articles. She's doing essays, different kind of things. And so and I use Grammarly for this, and I use this. So she's just even more products that are kind of interlinked, between all this. But she's also writing songs and sermons and journals. So it's a very encompassing kind of thing beyond academic work. It's really about the intellectual work that you're doing, or the spiritual work that you're doing, or the creative work that you're doing. It's not all science, in that sense. So I think the main theme I wanted to share with these three examples is that, there's these set of like workflows and structure that can be built around sort of your notes or your knowledge capturing, and that these different tools connected together in different ways really kind of can personalize that or customize that for the individual's needs. So again, whether you're dealing with code and want to connect to code, whether you're dealing with more text-based things, whatever that outcome is, that it's flexible in there for you. Let me see. All right, so my third and final seed that I want to plant today. So the first was integrating notes, integrating thoughts, integrating ideas, and being able to link that together, find it, and building a structure around that. Second one, next was integrating sort of tools to optimize, we'll say, the inputs and the outputs of that thinking that you're kind of doing. This third one is integrating across knowledge sources, or diverse knowledge sources, we'll kind of say. I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick and then we'll dive into this one. Let's see where, yeah. All right. So this year I've been interviewing a bunch of PhD students and postdocs and recent people who are now in research lab, like early career folks, we'll kind of say. And I've just been asking them about their literature review practices. How do they find information? What do they do once they find it? And a consistent challenge that comes up is navigating these domains of diverse disciplinary areas. And what you're kind of seeing is like people will tend to know like their discipline very well, or their niche, very small niche or subsection of their discipline pretty well. But there's a struggle with different methods, different terminology, different concepts. And it's interesting across whether I'm talking to a business student or an engineer or even a historian, where people will talk about people using different terms for the same things. And sometimes that's even in their like in their direct discipline or something very adjacent to it. Again, different ideas, and or someone's doing something just slightly different, but they're struggling to kind of navigate that and find that. And I think that's just, there's these different schools of thought, these currents of thought, these different knowledge communities, different bodies of literature, and the words, the emotion that comes up when you're talking with these students and researchers is that it's frustrating, it's cumbersome. One gentleman who's finished with his, but he used the term like this hopelessness. It was like so sad, kind of talking with him about the struggle of trying to find things. And I have theories on that, but save that. I think sometimes there's research or papers or ideas that are basically getting overlooked. And from a library point of view, I feel like maybe there's something that we can do. And I'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to take this from another variation, this idea of this theme. This is a cover article from Science about a climate change and glacier melting research. And I spoke with the lead authors at CMU, professors 2 buildings away from where I'm at today in the library. And obviously, when people are working on a complex global problem, it's going to relate to other disciplines. They're going to connect, overlap, maybe compete, and that was a thing that we talked a lot about, was like him needing to kind of get outside of his domain and talk with people from all over these, both the world literally, but also like the world of knowledge, if you will. And again, I think when you look at this type of research, it's again different perspectives, different toolkits, different methods and interests, mandates, metadata schemes, different knowledge sources, different languages like programming languages, but also subject headings or terminology or just international speaking languages. It's very sort of common. But I want to point a few things out here. I think it's interesting when you look at the funding information, where it's pulled together from all kinds of different international agencies who are all invested in this topic. So that's kind of interesting. And I think it's also interesting to look at the contributors, where a lot of the people involved were able to provide unique data sets or methodologies or skills, visualization, emulation, things like that, that they could kind of contribute. And the thing in my conversation with this professor, and he didn't quite say it this way, but it was like my sort of through line that I was kind of pulling together, was doing this kind of work. It's much more than just the science or the math or the analysis or the writing or the design. It's kind of, you're putting together an international coalition. You're putting together a team. You're putting together a workspace to work on this thing, but also the funding. And again, all these different funding agencies, all these kind of different things are kind of happening. And that really stuck with me, of like, this is like one article that you assemble this team and they're able to kind of pull it off. And it's a good art, is an important article, but it's just the labor that's beyond just the science. It's almost like running the business of a lab, if you will, in that sense. And I'll point out too, I think another interesting thing is the availability, and the data sets are available, the model is available, the code is available. And I think, in libraries, we've focused a lot on open access and open science and open research, and that's so vital. But I think there's something more here when you kind of connect all this. This is these thoughts this is an example of my streams of thought that I would put together that would collide and come and unify. But I think along with openness, I think that there's opportunities for libraries to help facilitate or advise or partner, somehow get involved around a couple things of like team science, coalition building, collective knowledge building, bridging those interdisciplinary sources and interdisciplinary practices and methodologies, the data obviously too. So I think there's something there around just not opening science, but integrating it, or I don't know, there's something there. We can kind of talk about that. Uh, I think, this is kind of getting toward the end here, but I think when it comes to these like this is a big theme I'm on right now these days, and trying to tackle from different angles. But when I think about like these big, complex, systematic, global, wicked problems, this disciplinary thinking, it this silo thinking, it keeps us kind of stuck. It keeps our ideas small and unconnected, or not fulfilling the potential that they could. And I think when you look at things like climate change or inequalities, food, water shortages, energy, health, pandemics, pick a problem. There's teams of researchers around the world, working on these areas, using different languages, different terminology, publishing in different places, different methods, different data, different incentives, different bodies of knowledge. And I feel like if we as librarians, like, we really want to help and we really want to do a difference, it's like, is there ways to create like overlays or bridges or ways to kind of help researchers to be more inclusive, particularly in an information sense, more comprehensive with the sources and the content? Like, that's just something that's really sticking with me. Is there ways that we could sort of integrate knowledge? These are just a set of tools that kind of come to mind, but uh, can we help people find, I think, both the seminal works, the pivotal works, but maybe works that are sort of unappreciated or off radar, or something that's really important, but it's hidden or invisible in some way, like that's kind of where I'm at now. And I think in my conversations with a lot of STEM researchers, particularly the PhD students, it's a Google Scholar driven world. And I think we lose people lose some kind of connectivity in that way between the sources, because you're searching and going on, you're not seeing the relationships between it. And that's why I think like the AI driven tools like Perplexity and Rabbit and so on are kind of starting to try to fill that need, or there's that gap that's kind of missing from Google Scholar. But I think that we've lost this sort of sense of taxonomies and ontologies and so on, and being able to I think there's potential here. I'll just kind of leave it at that. So I'm going to close this up. We can kind of talk, but in closing, what my summary here is that I view this integration of notes and tools and sources as like a vital, potentially untapped infrastructure. And I think that this scaffolding or these systems for idea management, idea development, idea generation can itself become a type of instrument, a researcher's instrument, if you will, similar to a telescope. It's allowing us to see things that we couldn't see before, or make connections in ways. And I'm Brian Matthews. Thanks for listening. If you want to send me a note, some beyond this kind of thing, I'm happy to kick ideas around, or talk about project management or knowledge management. And if you want to build something, or even better, if we want to like try and connect some scientists who are trying to solve global wicked problems, I'm happy to talk with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian, for your presentation. I thought it was really, really insightful, especially because of the practical things that you started from. You didn't like just give us an overview, but you said, okay, here's an example of how I do it. And I think that's where we, as a community, we get the most value, because it's a starting point where we can then do our thinking and interconnect those thoughts into something practical. So I really appreciate that. I also wanted to mention that this picture is amazing. I also have a picture of myself in a suit like that, in a PPE suit. And I presented once, and I had a picture of myself in that suit at the end, and I could hear people laugh. So you can't hear people giggling at the end of a presentation now, but I'm sure a few of us smiled when we saw that. So thank you for sharing, and I would love love to then begin with the questions. Also, please, everybody, if you have any more, use the Q&A box. It's there for you to ask anything that you might think is relevant to continue this conversation. We do have about maybe 10 minutes to ask a couple of the questions that we received. And I would like to start with one that we got in advance ahead of the webinar starting date. Because I think it connects well with what you were talking about throughout, which is how do we interconnect? And the question is, how important is it to have somebody who specializes in STEM research within a library? Now, this question I think can be answered also in the light of what you said, is how important is that, I would like to add, versus having somebody who's more eclectic, who's more, able to connect the dots in a sense. Not that a specialist can't do that, but I'm interested to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the scope and scale and what a university is. Presumably it's a university. It could be a lab or whatever the organization can do. But yeah, I definitely see. I think on like the teaching and learning side, you've seen like there's libraries will develop specialists around like undergrad research or service learning or international engagement, different kind of really kind of first year experience students, things like that. And I think there could be something on the research side. We tend to have liaisons or librarians or specialists who are subject specialists. It's kind of common. And then there's kind of like there's layers where we'll see like a data expert or data curation and things like that. And I kind of like this idea of like a team science, someone that can kind of pull that together, or even people on that sort of, we have a lot of like metadata specialists in libraries, but is there a way to kind of blend that together? Like there's a group it's not very big, but it's a growing interest at CMU around like decarbonization of steel, I think probably, but whatever that kind of theme is. And like they're starting to build, people from different disciplines are coming together to work on that, and they're going after grants and things like that. And it could be an interesting thing where we might create like a LibGuide or some kind of a finding aid for a class. It'd be interesting to think about, okay, we're going to help researchers in decarbonization. Like, what are those seminal papers? What are these kind of things? What are these languages? Like, if you can do like a taxonomy ontology and start to scope that out for like whatever the major themes are for your organization and kind of start to pull, that would be kind of interesting. Or, like I showed before, like that Obsidian sort of the visual graph, but again, being able to pull that together, or Zotero things together. Or again, I think if librarians are sort of trained to use databases in a classic, I feel so old now when I talk about that, but using like subject headings and using sort of Boolean operator, like being able to kind of really find the research that could be useful to that group, even if that's somewhat passive, or even if it's like a lot of libraries have gotten involved deeply with like systematic reviews and will join sort of projects, whether that's medical or policy or different themes. So I kind of am getting to the point of like, I think there's a value of like that team science or like that ontologies and taxonomies and something that could be, I don't know if it's college related or department related or thematically related, and there's just something there. I want to experiment with that a little bit.
Absolutely agreed. And I feel like that's also why we're here to get connected with people who are different than us, have different areas of expertise, and then maybe understand how they work around these specialisms versus more generic approach to, like you said, a taxonomy where we can interconnect knowledge. I really liked the graphic design aspect of everything that you showed as well, because for a brain like mine, which loves to see visual things, I think it was really helpful as well to understand why it becomes valuable at that point. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, but before we get to those, I'd like to ask you one more question, which is, in your experience, what is the one thing that researchers ask the most?
And
I would add to that, how do you tackle that? If a question comes up once, you answer. If a question comes up 100 times, how do you make sure it doesn't come up again?
Well, maybe in some like machine learning kind of stuff on that, but I don't know. I used to be like a librarian in the field, so to speak, at Georgia Tech and other places, and I feel like I'm trying to think about how that was different. Like as an administrator, I get asked for money or resources. It seems that's what, can I help? Can I buy a data set, or can I, there's something with that. But I don't know. I might put it to the chat with that one, like phone a friend. If people want to kind of put what's out there. I think sometimes what I've kind of seen with STEM researchers in particular is they seem to be very sort of self-sufficient. Usually when they're coming to us, it's because maybe they wrote a data plan and it got pushed back from a funding agent. I don't know if that's like the one thing, but just the common things like that, where there's something where there's something missing in their proposal, or their a publication or something like that, and they need us to help with like submitting a data plan or so forth. Or sometimes there's a question around access to things for people from other universities and things like that kind of come up. I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer on that one. I'm sorry.
I think that's a pretty good answer, to be honest. And I know it's a tricky question as well, so don't worry about that one. We've got a few more. One that we've just received, so I'll take a couple of seconds to read that one through. But somebody asked us quite a specific question, which is, when you have only one class to speak about scientific literature with 50 to 75 minutes as a time limit, how much can we do? I think that's from an information kind of system perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing I would use that as is like a commercial for, like, if you're having problems, talk to me. Like, here's how you can kind of get a hold of us. And again, when I was saying, like, when I'm talking to a lot of these PhD students now, like they're kind of either different phases of their dissertation or have recently finished, and it's like there's that struggle to like search the literature. And everyone, I don't want to say everyone, we'll say 9 out of 10 are like, Google Scholar is it. And I think, and I've gone back and started using Google Scholar and trying it just to kind of see, and you find all this stuff, but it's so decontextualized. It's so kind of all over the place. And, I've, had someone who just took an interesting job, just finished his dissertation in December. I was asking about GPT and a lot of the chat things. And he says, he knows his field really well, and he'll often ask it, what do you know about this electro, blah, blah, it's really niche engineering thing. And it'll give him all kinds of papers, but it doesn't give him like the top people that he knows it should be doing. So it's kind of, I think if you only have an hour, I think, again, there's only so much you can kind of do. I think being able to plant that seed, like, hey, we're here to help you. Don't struggle. Don't feel hopeless on this. There's, we can customize a solution for you. We can kind of get in, we can show you, and maybe show them a little bit of like, here's these great tools we have and how powerful they are. Explore it on yourself, or come and talk to us. There's multiple ways to get a hold of us or our colleagues and so on. That's how I would use that hour, unless I specifically had something from the provost, the professor, to like demo chem abstracts or something. If you have something very specific you have to demo or show, then that's there. But I think the overarching brand or the message is, talk to us, we're here to help.
I can agree more that it's one of those situations where you just have to make the most of what you've got. And it's also kind of a meta question, because that's exactly what I did with you, Brian. I said, oh, you have 25 minutes to talk about everything, and then you decided to plant a seed. And I think that's, extremely appropriate to what we experience even in these talks, where we do have a short amount of time and we need to make the most of that. Brian is also extremely kind, and he said if any of you have any more thoughts or questions, he's available to speak later about them. But that applies, right? He's only here to talk about a topic for 40 minutes. There could be probably hours of talks to fit into this topic. So thank you for asking this question, Aditi. I have one more, which is more of a consideration that somebody wrote anonymously, but I'd like to read it out loud, because they say, I think another area of frustration for scientists is the splitting apart of what used to be the major highly interdisciplinary journals, such as Science and Nature, into more and more subtitles. So Climate Change Fox could find lots of important research in the main title, but then they had to go to Nature Geoscience to see climate change, and then there is next separate Nature Climate Science, blah, blah, blah. This falls well under the frustration aspect that the early researchers are noting. I just wanted to comment on that, because it's something that, well, obviously you can see where I work, work, from my background, something that we come across a lot is the fact that, for example, Jove decided to not have subtitles, but have one big journal. I know that's not feasible for everybody. There's a jungle out there that's based on impact factors and a variety of other reasons why they're splitting subtitles. But the interdisciplinary aspect of a journal is slowly getting lost. And personally, it's something we've decided not to go for. We want to keep the interdisciplinarity active to make sure that people can still connect the dots. But I also wanted to hear your thoughts, Brian, if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think there's market forces at play, that are kind of driving that. I think we'll just leave it there. But no, I think that is true. I think I like the word you used of jungle, and I think that's kind of that's what students are experiencing is that kind of thing. And I think, particularly we'll say students are like early career researchers too, where I think maybe, this is just I'm putting out there. Like, I think maybe there's a lack of, I think some disciplines are better. I think chemists and mathematicians are sort of different, in sort of the way that their tools kind of work. But I think that there's a lack of literacy, for lack of better terms, of like this search literacy of how to kind of find these how to navigate that jungle of information. And yeah, I think that the comment is right on, where there's not read these 4 journals and you're all set, but there's like so many others. And that's I think that nested complication of these things, where if I'm working on climate change and I'm a glaciologist, I also have to know about oceanography, and I have to know about geology, and I have to, there's eventually there's going to be some policy thing, and there's certain people are focused on the drinking water, others are focused on the flooding, and it's all over. So that's part of that. These problems become more complex, and even, I think it's kind of like you're trying to deal with like complex problems while also dealing with a complex world of information. And that's where I think, again, the librarian aspect can come in, is like there's people who are trying to thread that together. And so that's where this is kind of like, I'm starting to talk about this more now, but it's just, that's the thing to figure out, I think, if we're really gonna, I think, try to move the needle on some of these big problems. It's threading together the sources of information.
Sounds like an extremely tough job. My mother has been a librarian for 43 years, so I am completely partial to that. But I think librarians will and continue to save the world on a daily basis through that mentality as well. We got to the end of our presentation, so thanks to all of those who came, asked questions, participated. There's been some wonderful engagement, and I would love to personally thank you for coming here today and for staying with us until the end. And obviously I would love to thank Brian. Your presentation was super insightful. I've already said that, but I want to stress that out, and somebody is saying the same in the chat. I think everybody enjoyed hearing some practical tips and something you've actually tried out before. And I could tell that this thought process was, useful in so many different ways, not just, for me, but also sometimes it's useful for the speaker, it's useful for the audience. So I love creating this process where we all come together thanks to somebody's, train of thought that comes together in a presentation, but also in a design like the one that you shared. So thank you, Brian. This was fantastic. And I really look forward to hearing what everybody has to say after, when we send out the recording, which you will receive within a couple of days. And yes, thanks again. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.